All right, guys, I just wanted to give everybody a little update on the future situation for the Electoral College. I've been seeing some things on social media, people talking about it. Where do we stand right now when it comes to how the Electoral College is going to be looking in 2030? I've done a few videos in the past in 2024 on this. They did do an update at the end of 2024 to reassess the projections on where they think the 2030 census is going to be. Now, before I even get into that, I do want to say the 2020 census was a total mess. It happened right in the middle of the pandemic. We know everything got shut down in March of 2020, and they do the census every 10 years. So there was some problems with it, and Trump and other people called them out to where they, I guess, misassigned two electoral votes to liberal states than they should have been. They should have been Republican states. People have been saying, well, they need to do an update in 2025, which is this year. It's like a mid update in between 2020 and 2030 to update everything and make sure everything is right. I don't think they're going to do that, but the 2020 census was a mess, and it's unfortunately messed up the electoral vote distribution to a small degree. But when it comes to 2030, the thing that we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of U.S. citizens move out of liberal states into Republican states for a number of reasons: crime, taxes, cost of living. But it's going to create a big problem. Now, this is not going to be happening for 2028, whether it's JD Vance or whoever, they're not going to have this advantage. But right now, and by the way, when it comes to these forecasts like 5 years out, they tend to have some variance in terms of normally it ends up not being this radical. So if you see a state that says, oh, they're going to gain 4 electoral votes, the fact that we're in 2025 right now, or this technically was 4 years, 2024, 4 out of 10, it's probably going to come down at least a little bit. But what we saw with the pandemic, it kind of supercharged the migration from liberal states to conservative states. And so this is basically what this is. And you can see you do have California. They'd be losing around 3 electoral votes. Another thing I want to say, and I had to look this up, but it is true, the way they distribute these electoral votes is based off of total population, including undocumented immigrants. So if you wonder, and I think Biden and just the Democrats in general, that administration, they knew this was coming. They knew that there was going to be a big migration into Republican states. It had kind of been simmering in 2017, 2018, and then the pandemic really supercharged it. And the craziest thing is they say, well, no, it doesn't affect too much because, I mean, how many illegal immigrants are really in the country or undocumented or people here on visas? Because that's what's counted in the census, just total population. But think about it. You've got like 4 million. I mean, the original estimates, the administration said they're like, oh, there's 5 million illegal immigrants here, or undocumented immigrants is what they say. But they updated that in like 2023, early 2023. And then they didn't update it again. There was no number. That's why you got all these weird estimates, people saying, well, there's 11 million illegal immigrants. And then Trump said there was 20 million. So it was like they said there was 5 million. Then it was like, okay, that was in early 2023. They did do a better job late 2023 to 2024 in shutting down the border to a degree, at least reducing the illegal immigration because they had to, because it was such a huge issue in the election and they were trying to hang on to political power. But this comes back to the 14th Amendment. That's why this is the way it is. I think it's crazy when it comes to these electoral votes that they can be decided with the help of illegal immigrants. If they're in California, they could give them an extra electoral vote. They could give them an extra electoral vote in New York. And that 14th Amendment just keeps on giving, right? Which was originally put in place really to just ensure that slaves and the descendants of slaves had rights after the 13th Amendment in 1865. The 14th Amendment in 1868 was not meant to be used in the way that it's being used. That's why we want the Supreme Court to reinterpret the birthright citizenship, because when they did the 14th Amendment, it was not for mass migration to Western countries to have anchor babies. They are manipulating the 14th Amendment. And it's not even reinterpreting it. It's just interpreting it correctly and enforcing what it said. It was based around slavery and around giving slaves and ensuring that slaves had the right to vote and the right to have representation. So But I mean, let's just get to this because this is remarkable. It's Texas and Florida +8 electoral votes. Illinois losing 1. It's New York losing. These are liberal hotbeds. California loses 3, New York loses 2. Now, there was also an update in 2023, and it was even more positive for the conservatives. So maybe you could say, well, since, it's not, we're not even close to 2030 yet, maybe it'll end up getting more condensed. But I'm not sure. I mean, I think like even by 2030, Texas at minimum is going to gain 2 or 3 electoral votes. California at minimum is going to lose 2 electoral votes. I think Florida probably gains at least 3. And I mean, now you're talking about these Republican states talking about no property tax and no state income tax. And it's only the Republican states talking about this. So they're giving tax breaks. So it's going to be more people moving there. You've also got, you can see Idaho, they would be gaining an electoral vote. Oregon losing an electoral vote. I mean, it's all Republican places gaining Democratic, Republican states gaining, Democratic states losing. You've also got Arizona. Remember, we saw what happened with the election in Arizona. That was a very solid 5.5-point victory. We consider it a swing state, but who knows in 2028, I think Vance or whoever the Republican is would be the favorite. It's too early for that. But the point is, you're talking about like clear Republican states +4, so that's +8. 9, 10, 11 with Utah there. So that's +11 electoral votes for Republican states. And then you've got Minnesota losing 1. You've got Wisconsin, which is a swing state, losing 1. Illinois losing 1. Pennsylvania, swing state, losing 1. But the two liberal hotbeds, how about Rhode Island losing 1 as well? You've got New York losing 2 and California losing 3. So for the Democrats, this is a big problem. And that's why they're freaking out, and that's why they've got a identity issue. I think Democrats, by and large, are going to shift to being more moderate. They're really going to attack working class white people in terms of trying to get them. That's who they're going to go after. And so they're going to have to appear more moderate, and they're going to give up the DEI stuff, and they're going to give up the trans stuff in sports. All of that is going to be dropped by the Democrats largely by 2026, 2027. We can sit here and we can say, well, the Democratic Party is dead. But that's just not true. We know that. This is an off year. They're like, well, we have a horrible approval rating. I mean, listen, if this was 2026, then yeah, this would be very bad for them because you're talking about the midterms happening at this point in about 7-8 months, but they're next year, of course, not this year. So I would say, listen, when it comes to this, like the future of the United States, certainly you have a lot of people because, I mean, it's obvious reasons. It's taxes, it's cost of living. It's also enforcement of crime, which is something a lot of just normal working class people want to have. They want to have a good ecosystem in terms of punishing people. And so, yeah, this is pretty crazy, but it's the Florida-Texas migration, and it's also the thing that we really saw with the pandemic was the change of Florida, because Florida was always a swing state. You had everyone saying that Hillary was going to win it. People thought Biden was going to win it. Well, now, as we can see with Trump winning it by double digits in 2024, it is a clear Republican state. And it's the same thing with Texas. You know, liberals were looking at the electoral map in 2016, and they were talking about flipping Texas and that they were going to get Florida. They're getting neither now. And so when you have that radical of a change in terms of electoral math, and on top of that in 2030, you're giving those states more electoral votes, it becomes a problem for the Democrats. Again, this is a long ways off, but we could kind of understand why the Republican states are going to gain. They are going to get more migration into their states. And now we're dealing with this thing to where Republicans can win the popular vote. There was all this big stigma about Republicans not being able to win it. This is a more Republican country. And it becomes a problem, but it is ridiculous, the 14th Amendment, when you look at it, and they divvy up the electoral votes based off of total population, including, it's just not citizens. It's not only citizens. It is crazy to me that they do that. And that's the 14th Amendment. But, I mean, you can't foresee the mass migration. That thing was made in 1868. But either way, guys, that's just the updated look. And then I was able to find more interesting data in relation to the growth rate of these states, conservative versus liberal. You can see the top 10 largest states expected in 2030. California is going to stay number one no matter what. They just have such a big advantage. But you've got Texas and Florida back to back at number 2, number 3, both Republican states. New York, another liberal state, but they're at number 4. Pennsylvania, swing state. Illinois, Democrat state. Ohio, Republican. Georgia, swing. North Carolina, swing. Michigan, swing. Top 10 fastest growing states. Utah. People were a little bit angry about Utah in the election. I don't think it ended up, like, originally, I know the first numbers that came in out of Utah were a little bit surprising, a little bit more in Kamala's favor than people expected based off of their result in 2020. It's mainly, I think, probably because of Democrat transplants moving in from California because of the cost of living. Idaho gaining significantly Republican. Texas gaining 11% growth rate. That's a very highly populated state. That 11% growth rate is crazy in a state that has that high of a population. North Dakota gaining an 11% rate. I mean, these are Colorado also. Those are liberals coming in from California. Possibly also moving to Washington. But also you've got Florida at a 10% growth rate. With how big the population size is, a 10% growth rate is very impressive. And obviously you don't see California on this list in terms of the growth there. But either way, this is looking pretty good for Republicans. You know, it's very early. You have to throw in the prerequisite by saying that. But, I mean, you got to be a little bit worried if you are the Democrats. And I'm sure this is a trend that they've seen, and people have talked about this in the past 2 or 3 years, that once you realize that Florida is a Republican state, Texas is a Republican state, and both of those states are gaining rapidly in terms of population, that is a double whammy for the Democrats. So guys, that's going to do it for this video.